We equate youth with innocence. And if indeed we are equating innocence with lightness, and therefore whiteness, what are those implicit and explicit messages being sent? We treat Black children as if they're older than they are. And, so then are we treating them as less innocent, for example? And so, I think there's a lot of questions around this. And, what are those implicit or explicit biases that are going into, creating these actual images?
Interesting. That's very exciting research you have. It sounds like you have a lot on your plate too.
It's a privilege to be able to work on these questions.
Absolutely, and I'm sure you're a blast at parent-teacher conferences as well.
Well, it's been great. Actually, what's nice about working on these questions is, so I have 2 children, and they both love to hear about it, and actually they have lots of strong thoughts and opinions, and it really keeps me grounded to hear their perspectives about things, and it also helps me not overthink some of the questions and try to see things from, okay, well, how does a kindergartner look at these? And in fact, in the representation project, they've helped do a lot of the manual coding because it's better to see it through their eyes than my eyes.
Absolutely. The research is a family affair.
Exactly.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Adukia. It was great to hear about all the research you've done and the research that you'll be doing in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a delight speaking with you.
All right. Have a great day.
Take care.
Welcome now to the Chicago Policy Review, where we interview a writer from the Chicago Policy Review about a recent article they published. The review article is usually about education policy, but if it's not, we'll try to make them talk about education anyway. Today we are joined by staff writer Alexia Lipman, who spoke with us about the past, present, and future of the United States federal child tax credit. Alexia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So you wrote a great article for the Chicago Policy Review about the child tax credit. Can you give us a bit of history on that?
Yeah, so the child tax credit was introduced in 1997, and it was really different than it is today. It was originally much smaller. I think it was $400 per child under 17. And it was also non-refundable, which is another concept we can get back to, or I can explain it now.
Go for it.
Okay. Just refundable tax credits mean that even if you don't have any liability, you can get the money back. And that usually lower income families might not have as much tax liability. And so the refundability is really important for them. So essentially, to begin with, the child tax credit wasn't refundable, and one of the recent changes was making it fully refundable. So that's how it's changed. It's gotten bigger since its original inception. It's gotten a lot bigger, actually.
Great. And then it's been in the news recently because it was part of previous COVID kind of stimulus bills, if I recall correctly, and now with the sputtering of Biden's Build Back Better bill, it's gone into abeyance. So what's going on with that politically right now?
Yeah. So the American Rescue Plan was was passed, and essentially it increased the size of the credit from $2,000 to $3,600, which is a huge increase. It's like nearly double for children under the age of 6, and then it increased it to $3,000 for children up to the age of 17. So it's slightly bigger for people who have younger kids. It also, another one of the changes is that it made it so that families could take it in monthly installments. So starting in July, I believe, they could get a monthly credit as opposed to just at the end of the tax year filing and getting that big refund of $3,000. So they were receiving like $250 or up to $300 per month for the tax credit. Another thing is that they removed income requirements. So people that weren't making any money at all could receive the credit, which was huge. And making it fully refundable. So again, that helps when you don't have any tax liability and you can just get the money back.
And so is it different for the different number of kids you have?
Well, the credit applies per child. So when you have more children, you get more money.
And is there an income cutoff? So who gets this credit?
Yeah. So it's structured such that at a certain amount of income, you don't get the credit. And not everyone gets the same amount of the credit. It depends on how much money you're making.
Okay.
But the max credit is $3,600 for children under. And actually, this is no longer the case because the American Rescue Plan just enhanced it until the end of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And this was sort of what the whole fight was in Congress with the Build Back Better Act. They were trying to extend these changes, but unfortunately they couldn't extend them. So the credit reverted to its smaller size, and it's also no longer happening in monthly installments.
Interesting.
Yeah. So now it's just you claim it at the end of the year again.
Okay. And you said there used to be a requirement to have some income for it. So it was kind of like the earned income tax in that way, where you got more tax credit the more you up into a certain income. When was that phased out?
So as part of the American Rescue Plan, they phased out the income requirement. So you could earn it even if you weren't earning income. And now that has expired at the end of 2021, there is now an income requirement again.
So this tax credit it applies to families with children. What is the kind of purpose of this policy, of this tax credit?
It was originally made in as part of the 1997 Taxpayer Relief Act. So I think it's just in general, like taxpayer relief, it is expensive to have children. And so the federal government wanted to establish a credit that basically provided support for people who had children. And it's really can be claimed by low to middle income to upper middle income families. So it isn't like necessarily targeted at just the bottom end or the lower end of the income spectrum. So it's really just, I think, like a credit to offset some of the costs associated with raising children.
Yeah, I'm sure if you asked anyone at pretty much any income level, they could say they would appreciate a few more dollars to spend on their children. So does everyone agree? I mean, is there a consensus that this is a good thing in the federal government right now, or are people still on either side of this issue?
Well, it's pretty partisan. So Democrats, I think in general, think it's a very good thing. There have been a lot of studies that have shown that it's decreased child poverty, that it has been very effective at that. And of course, Build Back Better Act, all the Democrats wanted to extend it and keep the larger amount of the credit intact. Republicans, on the other hand, don't like that it was not tied to, working. They want people that are working to be the ones who qualify for this tax credit. Yeah, that was basically the Joe Manchin complaint, is that it wasn't tied to work requirements. And so that's why Republicans had a lot of a hard time, or didn't want to. And Joe Manchin obviously is a Democrat, but most Republicans didn't like that it wasn't tied to work requirements. Also, it's really expensive, and Republicans didn't really want to add a lot more to the bill. They're really concerned about inflation.
It's interesting. The work requirement is an interesting thing. I mean, this is more of a philosophical how we define work as a society and policy wise, but it assumes that paid work is what they want, right? Like child work, taking care of children. For some people, it is work. But if you do it for your own children, it's not considered work, correct?
Yeah, no, for sure.
So to get around it, you can watch my kid. I'll pay you to watch my kid. You pay me to watch your kid. And we can,
No, yeah. I mean, work requirements, Republicans love work requirements for everything. I think there is, in my piece, I did look at a study actually done at, by UChicago that looks at, the impact of work requirements on the labor supply. And essentially, the idea is that when you don't have work requirements, people will be less likely to work. And I think, and they looked at that, and they looked at how it would impact also the poverty reduction ability of the credit, and it did impact that. But it's all still very theoretical, right? So there are those concerns, but I don't think it should be, and in my piece I'm kind of that shouldn't just mean that we don't go forward and we don't do the child tax credit. There can be some sort of compromise because there are so many benefits to the child tax credit.
And so you mentioned that researchers have shown how much this was impacting childhood poverty. Obviously, direct benefits, direct kind of cash transfers to families with children is going to help out with that. Was there any other research you saw about the benefits of this policy?
Yeah, so the one that I looked at in my article was about the short-term effects of, basically they looked at right before the monthly credit started in July of 2021, and sort of after in the next couple of months. And they basically looked at survey information and saw that people were really using the money to get food on the table, essentially. And for other purposes too, but they saw an actual like significant change in the number of people who were food insecure before and after, and it decreased after because they had that extra $250, $300 per child each month to, you know, supplement their what they're buying for their children. So
yeah, absolutely. Now, this is an education policy podcast. So we're going to make you talk about education, even if it wasn't strictly the focus of your article. How could you see the child tax credit impacting families spending on education for their children?
I mean, I think a lot of expenses are education related too, right? Like supplies for school, especially because the monthly credits were introduced in like July, and in August, students are going back to school. So I'm sure many families use the extra money to help pay for school supplies. I mean, and in general, just like having that extra income probably helps family life at home and students at home. And that probably impacts, you know, their behavior in school and, you know, so I think there's a tie. I mean, I guess this is more of a question for you. Like, how do you think that that extra income impacts education?
Well, yes. I mean, so obviously there's a litany of things families could spend it on, right? They could spend the money on extracurricular activities, on tutoring, because there's no restrictions to what this money is spent on, right? It's literally cash in your pocket. So they could even, you know, if they were looking at a private school or moving to a different neighborhood for a school, they were a little bit away from it, then this could have like put them into that area where they could afford that, right?
Yeah, no, I do think it's interesting because it's essentially like a cash transfer, where there's no requirements for what you need to use it on, and it is like a substantial amount of money. People are starting to feel that, especially after it has expired at the end of December. It expired, and now there are no monthly payments. And at the end of the year, people are going to receive a lot smaller of a benefit as well. So I really think that like the feature of it being able to be taken in monthly installments was probably also very impactful in terms of education, you know?
All right, so if you, Alexia, were the superintendent of a major school district and someone said, hey, Superintendent Alexia, what do you think about this child tax credit? Should we keep it for the sake of schools? It sounds like you would say, yes, keep it.
Yeah, I think I would keep it. I mean, I definitely think I would keep it. I think what is frustrating to me is that, like, there is so much support for it, and then there's, like, people who are wary of it because of the working requirements, etc. But it doesn't seem like the right solution is just to not do anything or to get rid of it, or it seems like there could be a compromise. So maybe some work requirements. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, most people can agree, like, and it has been effective. I think in general, it's like a pretty easy thing to get behind.
Yeah, I think most parents would agree that having more money would allow them to give their kids a better education. I guess the big question is, can we convince people to pay for it and spend the money for it?
Yeah, and I think I think some of the stuff I heard was like people thought that once they started doing these monthly installments, they would be so popular that it would be hard to stop doing them. And I guess that's something we'll see now, right? Because now people are like, oh, there's no more monthly installments, and maybe there will be more like kind of outrage about it. But that wasn't happening when they were making the decision.
Great. So where do you see the future of child tax credit going? It sounds like that we have the baseline in, and that's probably not going anywhere. But as far as the raised amount, do we see any pathway in which that gets put back?
Yeah, I guess I'm not super well versed about what's happening in DC right now. I think in general, just like the trend of it has been over the years that it's been increased. The amount of the credit has been increased. It seems like the monthly installment was really popular. I don't see I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be reintroduced in the next iteration, whenever that is. So I do think that, I don't think it's at risk of being rescinded at all, or, you know, it's still going to be there. I think it's like, what is the next iteration going to look like? How much more money are they going to include in it? Are they going to, again, get rid of the work requirements, income eligibility? Unsure about that. And then refundability also, again, is another big part of it. Will they make the tax credit completely refundable? which again benefits just the lowest income who probably don't owe